and welcome to the Kitchen Underground. I'm Audrey, and today we're going to be making a dish that's going to welcome us right into spring. It's going to be a spring onion and asparagus buckwheat risotto. So let's get a little more familiar with our ingredients. First up, we have buckwheat. Now, a lot of people might think that it's related to wheat, but it's not. It's actually a fruit seed that's related to rhubarb and sorrel. Buckwheat you can find in two different forms at the store. I buy it in the bulk section, it's a little bit cheaper. And you can find these, which are raw buckwheat groats, or you can find it in the toasted form, which is called kasha. That's often used as a cereal, but I like to use this and toast it myself if I use it in granolas, or for instance for today, for a risotto. A lot of people these days are worried about eating gluten. Now, you don't have to worry with this because it is gluten-free, and it's also delicious. It has a nice toasty flavor that's a little bit heartier than like a white rice or even a brown rice, and it's a little bit more versatile. It's really high in protein and fiber, and it contains all 9 essential amino acids, which is huge if you're a vegetarian. Our next ingredient are spring onions. Now, these are one of the first crops you're going to see popping up this spring, along with asparagus, which we'll also be using. I know that my brother and sister have really bad allergies in the springtime. I'm very fortunate and I don't get them. But one of the main things that you want to make sure that you're ingesting is quercetin, and spring onions are a great source of that. They're also really high in vitamins K and C, which are great for bone health. So make sure you get some of these. They have a really nice creamy flavor. They're not as strong as normal onions. They don't have that bite. So for those of you who aren't as keen to just have a red onion in your dishes because it's too overpowering, give spring onions a try. You might really like them. Asparagus is one of my sister's favorite vegetables. As such, I'm always trying to think of new ways to use it. I always like to roast it, which in this recipe we will be doing, but we'll also be making it into a creamier sauce as a substitute for like cheese or butter, which you traditionally use in risotto. Asparagus is also really high in nutrients. Not only is it anti-inflammatory, but it also helps you digest your food. This is because it doesn't digest right away into the stomach or the small intestine. It waits until it's into the large intestine and then breaks down the food. So this is a pretty simple recipe. All we're going to be using are the buckwheat groats, the spring onions, asparagus, and to top it off, we're going to poach an egg on top, just to give it a little extra dimension. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is set our oven so that it gets nice and hot when we're ready to start roasting our vegetables. We're also going to want to start heating up our vegetable stock. The way you make risotto is you're going to get your vegetable stock to about a rolling simmer and slowly add it to your whatever grain of choice you're using, whether it's rice, buckwheat, quinoa, anything you decide to use. We're going to roast our vegetables today at 375 for about 20 minutes, give or take. Most of asparagus is very sweet and succulent. However, the very end part gets very bitter and fibrous. So to figure out which part you want to eat and which part you want to throw out, you just take it by both ends and snap it. So this part you just want to discard. Now, once you do one, some people like to just snap one and cut the rest where it ends, but I think they're all a little bit differently, so I like to snap all of them. It doesn't take that long and it's worth a little extra effort. You're going to want to give the asparagus a good rinse once you've cut off the ends. Once your asparagus is washed, we're going to cut half of it in about 1-inch long pieces and leave the other half whole. For this recipe, we're going to use about 2 bunches of asparagus. For the pieces that we're going to cut, we're going to just take about 5 or 6 pieces in a bunch and cut it at an angle. Once they're cut, we're going to put them directly on a roasting pan, along with the other pieces that are just left whole. Once the asparagus is cut and put on the roasting pan, we're going to drizzle each section with about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil and sprinkle it with a little bit of salt and pepper, probably about ½ teaspoon each. I like to use the Himalayan pink sea salt, which contains a lot of natural minerals, so it's really good for you, and a little bit of cracked black pepper. So once you've drizzled your olive oil and salt and pepper, you're just going to give it a good toss and stick it in the oven for about 20 minutes. And after about 10, you want to check it and flip it, just give it a little bit of a turn so that it cooks evenly on both sides. Next, we have our spring onions. We're going to cook them 2 different ways. We're going to save about 1/2 cup to cook into our risotto directly, and then we're going to roast the rest to add to our creamy sauce and also into the risotto at the very end. Now, how I like to cut these is just take the root off and cut right below where the green part starts. And you can save the green part It's a lot like a scallion. It's directly related and it has the same flavors. So if you want to put it in stock or even top dishes with it, it's really good. Next, we're gonna give it a good wash. Or if the outer layer is really damaged, you can just peel it off like this and use the other one. No onions are created equal, so you kind of have to just go as you see fit. So the first 2 bulbs we're gonna do into about a medium dice. We're just gonna run our knife down the middle, and I like to just run the blade in rotation with the onion. Then turn it. Now we're gonna just set these aside for later. The rest of the onions we're gonna roast. So we're gonna cut them in a similar way, but just not dice them. We're just gonna leave them in strips. Once you have your onions cut, you're just gonna put them directly on the roasting pan again. And we're gonna do exactly the same thing as we did to the asparagus. We're gonna just a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper. Give it a good toss. And stick them in the oven for about 20 minutes. We're almost ready to start our risotto. But first we're gonna thinly slice a little bit of garlic to go in. For this recipe, I like to do about 2 cloves. So just gonna pluck it from the garlic, smash it with your knife, and the peel should come right off. Now, I like to just slice it really thin because then it doesn't crush all the molecules in the garlic. So it's been about 10 minutes. Let's check on our asparagus and spring onions. You can see it's just starting to blister, but we don't want to overcook for this because we're going to puree the majority of the bigger ones, and this we're going to mix into the risotto, so we don't want it overcooked. The garlic we're going to add into the spring onions, and then we're going to heat a little bit of olive oil in a pan and get our risotto going. The first thing we want to do is bring our vegetable stock to a simmer. In this, I put about 3 cups of vegetable stock. We might use a little bit more, or probably a little less, because we want it to be al dente, or to the bite. For my vegetable stock, I like to collect all the odds and ends of the vegetables I use throughout the week, put it in a big stock pot, and add about triple the amount of water to cover. And I like to just simmer that for about 4 or 5 hours. Once that's done, strain it and you have it ready to go. If you're not going to use that much stock, you can always freeze it too. If you're in a pinch, you can always go to the store and get pre-made vegetable broth, or they also have vegetable bouillons. So it's up to you, whatever you prefer flavor-wise. I like to use kind of a mix of carrots, leeks, celery, onions, a little bit of garlic or jalapeno depending on how spicy I want it. I think it's time to check our spring onions. Let's give it a look. They're starting to look good. You can see they're starting to brown up a little bit, and we just want them to be nice and tender. We're still a little crunchy, so just a few more minutes. Before we cook our buckwheat, we're gonna wanna give it a good rinse. So I just put it in a fine strained mesh. And we're gonna use 1.5 cups for this recipe too. And run it under cold water. And then we're just gonna let that water drain out for a few minutes. Now let's go check on our stock and our spring onions. I think that stuff is almost ready, and then we can get this going. Our stock is almost ready, so we're gonna heat up our pan. We're gonna add about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil, and once that's hot, we're gonna saute our diced up spring onion and our garlic. I think the spring onions are ready. You can see they're nice and tender and getting to look a little more translucent. Okay, you can see that the oil is now hot. It's streaming down. Now we're just gonna add our spring onions and garlic. We're gonna cook these on a medium heat until they're translucent. Now our stock is simmering, so we're gonna keep it on low so it doesn't go to a boil. So it's been about 3 or 4 minutes. We're gonna now add our buckwheat. You can see the onions are translucent, but it's right on the verge. We don't want the garlic to burn. So we're gonna toast the buckwheat for about another 3 minutes because we want it to get that nutty, nice toasted flavor. Then, once it's cooked a little bit, we're gonna add about 1/2 cup of white wine. This is optional, it just adds a little more flavor. After the wine burns off, we're gonna add our vegetable stock. And we're gonna just ladle it in about, 1/4 to 1/2 cup at a time until it's absorbed. One of the main benefits of cooking a grain this way, making it into risotto, is that it cooks it a little bit more evenly and the starches rub off a little bit at a time. It gives it a much creamier outcome. I think we're ready to add our wine. Today I chose the Sauvignon Blanc just because it has a little bit more of a minerally quality and a little bit, not too much of a sweetness, but it's not as dry. So we're going to do about a half a cup into here. When you've used about 3/4 of your stock, you're going to want to taste it. You want it to be pretty al dente, and keep in mind that we're going to be adding another sauce to it, so you don't want it soupy. So this is looking and tasting good. Now I'm just going to turn this off, cover it so that it stays just how it is. It'll absorb the rest of the liquid, and we're going to make our sauce and start to poach our eggs. The first thing we need to do in this next stage is get our water boiling for the poached eggs. We're going to bring it to a boil and then turn it down to a simmer in order to poach them. Now while that's going, we're going to start our sauce. The first thing we're going to want to do is set aside these nice cut up pieces of asparagus and about 1/3 of the onions. We're also going to take out a few of the long stalks of asparagus just for garnish on the top of our plate. This next part is really simple. All we're going to do is combine the asparagus, the onions, a little bit of lemon juice, and a little bit of salt and oil. So let's cut our lemon. A lot of seeds in that lemon. Pepper. So we added the rest of our asparagus and onions, 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, and 2 tablespoons of water, and another little pinch of sea salt and black pepper, and half a lemon. Next we're going to add the remaining asparagus and onions to our buckwheat. Stir it in. And now we're going to add in our sauce. You can see it's a nice creamy green. Instead of cracking the eggs directly into the simmering water, I like to crack it into 2 little cups and then dump those into the water. You can see this is coming to a boil, so we're going to turn it down because we just want it out of simmer. And I'm going to add 3 teaspoons of vinegar to it. Either apple cider vinegar or white vinegar, rice vinegar, whatever you have on hand. So adding the vinegar is going to make it so that the whites congeal and the eggs stick together. The process for this is that we're going to give it a really good swirl, and then we're going to drop our eggs in, and that's going to make it so that the whites stick together. We're going to let it boil for about another minute, turn the heat off, cover it, and let it sit for about 4 minutes. Alright, so let's give it a try. So once your timer goes off, it's ready to take the eggs out. Make sure you have a slotted spoon on hand, and there we go. Okay, so to plate, we're just going to put a nice helping of our buckwheat risotto, some asparagus, and there we go. Spring onion, asparagus, and buckwheat risotto. Join me again next time at the Kitchen Underground.